Hey there, this is James, and I'm really excited about this Text In Together. As you know, we connect every Friday at this time to discuss some of the challenges and opportunities that we're all facing in the donor development and marketing communication roles at nonprofits. And today we have a good turnout, so I appreciate everybody being here. But just in looking at discussions of coming in through chat and preparation for this time together, I wanted to go through a real quick 10-minute tactic on the 3 steps to mastering your donor journey. Now, this is a blog post that's available, of course, on our website at rallycorp.com. You can also download our donor journey blueprint. Actually, at the end of the session here, I'll give you a link to that directly. But if you have any questions as we go through here, I'm more than happy to jump in. But let me walk through the 3 steps to mastering a donor journey so that we all kind of have a foundation that we work through. Now, listen, a donor journey really needs to be defined. A lot of us use that term. There's no shortage of content online about a donor journey. It's a process of raising someone's attention and activating them to participate in a mission. In sales and marketing, a lot of times we'll call it funnel, we'll call it sales process, but at the end of the day, it's really about the process of raising someone's attention and then activating them to participation with our mission, right? So, of course, there's some common challenges, and like with any good story, we start out with a good antagonist. So let me lay out some things that antagonize us as we move into our donor journey, because it would seem like that would be an easy thing to do, that we simply just have to lay out a process and go do it already. But as we know, there's often some challenges. So let's start with, of course, the first challenge, which is the challenge of the information age. We live in a time when there's no shortage of information. Like, we have our cell phones and we get pinged from social media, and we just have a lot of information coming our way. I've seen statistics that say that, you know, the average American sees 5,000 ads in a given period of time, or a given day. 5,000 ads in a given day. That's a lot of ads and requests for their time and money. So there's just an inundation of information. We have this always on digital world, and we're just constantly coming with more and more requests for our time and our energy, and it's hard for us to separate the signal from the noise and to identify, like, who do we trust, which of these brands or these movements do I want to be identified with, who do I most align with. So it's just a real challenge in the information age. I think in this time, in this culture, it's very important that we identify the information that's coming at us as actually an antagonist, okay? We also have the challenge of knowing. Look, we don't really know where to start. We have, in this day and age, we have so much data, we have so much insights, we can spend no shortage of time and just online really thinking through, like, okay, what is a donor journey? How do I do it? Like, we don't really know where to start, and there's just a lot of data. Even if we have the tools in place, we don't know how to interpret the results, and we struggle with the challenge of knowing. And we, of course, we have a lot of problem with process as well, don't we? We don't know where to start. And so, do we document? What is the right process? How do we go about doing this? So, in many of the organizations that I work with, I find that a lot of folks just really struggle with process. They don't define their process. They've not written anything down. They really couldn't tell you what makes for a successful donor. And so they just really haven't defined any process. So there's just a challenge of process as well. And then I have a blank one for you. So I would ask the group to communicate some of their own challenges. Like, what are some challenges that you struggle with when we talk donor journey? We talked about time and attention. We talked about the challenge of the information age, where everybody's coming at us with requests for our time. We talked about the challenge of really not having a process and not even knowing where to start. So what are some of the challenges that the community is seeing? And the group. So I appreciate the insights. It looks like we have challenge of, yes, energy. Like, where do I spend my time? That's great. Like, do I blog? Do I do Facebook? Do I do social? So what are some of the challenges that we're facing as a community? And we'll move on from this and let the conversations keep coming in through chat. But it's important that we just think through, what are some of the challenges that we're facing when it comes to mapping out a donor journey? Is it the process? Is it where to start? And is it the problem of knowing? Let's identify if we need to build out a process of actually defining the stages. Let's start with doing that together for our time today. The very first stage in a typical donor journey is just awareness. It's just being aware of your cause and what you are about as an organization. This is a problem across the board with every company, every organization. It starts with awareness. People will only separate from their money and participate in your cause, be it time, talent, treasure. They're only going to do that if they know you, they like you, right? And they trust you. So the know, like, and trust is an important part of building a well-qualified and defined process. So awareness, it starts with awareness. If they don't even know you exist, then certainly they can't get on board with your mission. With consideration, we'll talk about some aspects of this here. But with consideration, like, why would they consider? Like, where do they see themselves in your particular journey or with your particular cause? Why would they get on board and join in the journey of doing what you're doing? Like, why would they bother doing that? And that's consideration. And there's some aspects that we need to consider and talk about that as well. And some different ways in which we can create an opportunity for them to start and join us and to kind of mesh in, if you would, with our story. They got to enter into our story. They need to believe in what we're doing, of course. They need to feel like they can belong to it. And then, of course, they just need to see themselves as having identity in that. And we'll talk about that specifically here in a minute. Now, the last step, and a lot of us get this right, is decision, that we just need to ask for the close. If we're in a conversation, major gifts, we need to close the deal, right? We need to close it. Or it could just be having good call to actions on our website and good clarity as to what the next step is. But ultimately, we need to ask for a decision. And we often struggle with this. We don't make the ask, or we're not very clear in how I can get involved, or maybe we're asking for a decision, but it's a small decision when it could be a bigger decision. And without a process to move it from a small decision to a bigger decision, we're really missing out on an opportunity to move people into the journey. And then, of course, last but not least, is ambassadors. That we are about our mission. We have a cause. We want to make an impact. And it would be very important for us to look at ways that we move people as ambassadors to actually participate in volunteerism, in participation, and to actually what we're doing as an organization. So we want to turn them into red hot ambassadors that are really on fire for what we're doing as an organization. Now, here's what the journey looks like in more of a linear format. Now, right away, let me say this. In today's information age, this is going to look potentially a lot more like a figure eight. This is going to be more of a process. So if I were to draw that, and this is where I'm going to get in a little bit of trouble, but if I were to draw that, it may actually look a little bit more like this. And what that means is people can come in and get off at different steps of the process. It's not always a linear start here and in here, okay? For the purpose of this presentation, we're going to lay it out as systematic, linear steps, because I want us to understand journey does have a start and it certainly has an end, and we need to keep that in mind as we actually talk about the donor journey in a linear sense, okay? But it's also, just to be very clear, people can get on and off of your information, and they can stop in and visit for a while and leave and come in and go. And so there's going to be a lot more of this figure eight look as we discuss what a donor journey might look like, okay? So for donor journey, we move them from unaware, they don't know who we are, we make them aware. We do that through various tactics. I just have a few things listed here for you to consider, but we move them from awareness into consideration through inspiration, all right? And this is video, this is storytelling, this is just getting down to meeting folks with information that they can understand and see themselves fitting into. But from awareness to consideration, it's inspiration is the goal. That's what we're looking to do. That's the goal here in moving folks from awareness to consideration to participate. Now, what does consideration look like? Well, that can look different for everybody, right? Some of the organizations I work with, they take people on missions trips. Not so much during COVID, but they go overseas. They take people into orphanages. They take people down into different regions, and what they want to do is they want you to consider getting on with their mission and showing up and actually going overseas and participating. That's a big ask, but that's a big part of the way they generate their donations and their participation throughout the year. Now, for others, the consideration is quite simple. It's just take out your phone and text a keyword to a short code and opt in. But remember, the consideration could be big money, time-intensive travel, like with the example of the missions trip, or it could be something simple like, hey, just give $5, download a blog post, upload a story. It can be anything that you're asking them to consider doing as they look for inspiration, okay? So we're moving from consideration, opening the door, and then, of course, for them to take any action and actually move into the decision, they need to find alignment. And we'll spend a lot of time on alignment. I think this often gets overlooked. But alignment is where we bring people from just considering to be involved with what we're doing. They see themselves in the story to actually make a decision where we are very clear, like, this is what you need to do now. This is the next step. Let's take this next step with me. I need you to attend this event. I want you to fill out this form. I want you to make a pledge. I want you to make a donation. But now we're asking for a decision. People will not move from consideration to decision in a substantial way. I mean, they may give a few bucks, but they're not going to give a lot of money or a lot of their time or a lot of their attention unless you have alignment. And this is where we bring alignment to our journey. We'll talk about in a minute here what that looks like. Now, the last step is, of course, being an ambassador. So now that you've decided to be involved, I've moved from consideration, I found alignment, and I move into decision. Now we want to expand that relationship, and we want to move into becoming ambassadors, and where they promote what we're about, they're more involved, they go to the next level. This often looks like moving from a one-time gift to a reoccurring donation, a reoccurring gift, where they participate, or may look like they donate once, but now they're volunteering. And then, of course, the more they volunteer, the more they donate, the more they give, the more participation they have. We really want to bring them into perfect alignment, so much so that we activate them as passionate supporters for our cause. Okay? Then, of course, ultimately, there's some things there that we can talk about to do that. So let's talk about awareness. The goal is to inspire someone to move them to the next step. Always just inspiring to get somebody to move to the next step. The goal is, of course, to inspire them. The goal here for consideration is to move people to the next step. We want the goal of the consideration phase is to give them enough information where they can consider whether they belong to this cause or not, whether they belong to our mission, where they can see themselves getting on our bus, so to speak, and going on the journey with us. And of course, this is done, as I said, through alignment. To the degree we can get alignment, where they can see themselves in our story, where to the degree and the extent that they actually jump in and consider being part of what we're doing. Okay, so that again looks like this, to move from unknown to inspire. And here's some of the tactics that we've talked about that can do that. We'll get into more detail on that some other time. And then, of course, decision. The goal here is to expand, right? We start with a small action to further build our story and to align them with it, but ultimately we must move people to a more significant level of participation if we're going to create a longer sustainable process. Now, let me say this about being ambassadors. I see a lot of organizations here really struggle with ambassador. As a program, they don't name it at that. They're not really clear. But some of the organizations, even that I've served on the board of, we've looked for ambassadors to cover the lion's share, if you would, of what our costs are. So we're trying to identify individuals that we're working with that have donated to our cause, that would be willing to step up and become an ambassador to actually participate in a greater sense of what we're doing. We once covered a significant budget, a 7-figure budget, just with a group of individuals that we identified as ambassadors that would want to level up their participation through major gifts and be part of the kind of that foundational aspect of what we're doing. Okay, so that can look different for different organizations based on the types of money you're raising, but the point here is to clearly have a step in the donor journey where you go beyond just the initial gift and you move people to the next step of being passionate philanthropists and donors within your cause. Okay, so ambassador is an important aspect, and again, we move that into through expansion of having processes documented and implemented, and conversations around how we move people from expansion to ultimately promotion. Okay, all right. So now, to master your donor journey, really there's 3 steps. The first step is to identify, understand the identity of your donors and to look for that. Now, some folks call this, and rightfully so, donor personas, donor avatars, but what you're looking here for is to really understand, like, who's your identity of your donors. But beyond just the demographic, the goal here, ultimately, is to understand who your donors are and how they think, and then, of course, how they feel, so that you can then ask them to understand who you are, right? How you think, and then what you feel, so that you can ultimately move them to act with you. The goal is to get them to act with you. So think about that for a minute. If you don't have clear identity of who you are as an organization, if you don't understand what motivates your donors and the folks that support your cause, then you're going to really struggle here. You're going to struggle with always having to go back to the well to continue to get more money. You're going to be constantly, searching for tactical things. But to the degree you can get clarity on who you are, your identity as an organization, and then the identity and the motivation of the people that support that, and bring those into alignment, the better. All right, that's the first step, of course, to creating donor journey mastery. Right, is that identity, both your organization, but just as important, the folks that we're bringing into alignment. Now, the second step is to align head, heart, and hands. Now, I use head, heart, and hands here so that we're all clear that we think, we feel, and then we do, right? So to the degree we can bring alignment to our thinking and to our feeling, and then, of course, our action. Let's face it, every organization deals as humans with humans, right? We're dealing with humans, and the humans that on the other end of that phone call, the other end of that event, on the other end of that social media post, on the other end of that whatever you're doing, they are human, and they think and they feel. Some of us are a little bit more logical, and we will see ourselves participating in a cause if the data is there, if we're analytically able to kind of figure out some of those things. So some folks are a little bit more analytical, some are more feeling, like if they feel good about it, they're going to do it. So I think that does happen where people may be a little bit more analytical, or they may have a little bit more feeling, but 100% of the time, analytical people feel and feeling people think. Right? So 100% of the time, we deal with people across the same spectrum, the same continuum of thinking and feeling. We may present data a little differently to the audience, and we need to understand that, and that certainly is an aspect, but let's not overthink this. Let's just be very, very clear that even as an analytical, data-driven guy, I have feelings, right? And even as a feeling person, you like to know that your impact and that your part of your story is actually going to make a difference, and you kind of want to see how that all fits together, at least on some level, right? So we bring in alignment the head, heart, and hands so that they're thinking and they're feeling in the appropriate way. And then, of course, the last step, of course, is action. We want to have them take action, whether that's to make that first gift or to become a reoccurring donor or to come back and volunteer and to be an ambassador for our cause. We're bringing all that into alignment, right? Okay, now the last step to mastery is all this is good and well, but if you haven't reduced the friction along the way, if you've made it too complicated, if you've made it too hard, then people are just not going to do it. Because I don't care how clear an alignment they have in their head, heart, and hands. If it's just too much work, it's only going to be the super passionate people that are going to dig around to find your donation link on your website, or to try to figure out how to navigate a poorly designed workflow, or trying to it's just going to be really, really challenging to get them to take that action at large scale. Only the very few people will actually do it. And of course, that could be a challenge for us as we look to grow our base and our influence. Okay, so those are the 3 steps. As I said, the ultimate goal is to help them understand who you are, to bring that into alignment of how you think and feel, so that you can move them to act with you. When you mobilize your mission, you're looking to do that across the spectrum. You're looking to give them context and meaning that helps them better understand who you are. And to do that, you need to lay a message out so that you can intercept them and bring them into that alignment. So step number 1, understanding identity. Give them context, help them understand who you are, but understand who they are. Like, what is their potential hang-ups? What is their motivation? So here we look at demographics. In the blog post, I talk about this just a little bit, but I use an example of a gentleman in his 40s that rides a Harley, right? So those are data points. So if you can build a donor avatar or donor profile, and you can begin to understand your data and slice it in that way, that begins to tell a story. But really the point of the profile and the persona is really to get to the identity. People, we got to get to what makes them people and what makes them tick. If we're going to bring them into alignment, that's what we're looking for. Any data that doesn't tell the story that gets us to identity is not as helpful, right? It's good to know that we can target people on Facebook based on demographic data. It's good to know that we can get into some of those lookalike technologies and campaigns. We can certainly use some AI to get to some of this insight, as we do with my company. But really, at the end of the day, it's about driving that alignment of identity with the actual donors and understanding what motivates them. The motivation is what we are after as our cause. Now, why that's so important? Because we can't bring in alignment what we don't understand, right? And motivation and the way they think and the way they feel about certain aspects of that. So as you build out your donor profiles and your personas, and as you begin to understand and unpack who your most common donors are, it's just a simple step of looking at what data you're capturing, that would tell a story about who your donors are. But it could be just picking up the phone and calling your 5 or 10 top donors. It doesn't take much. But ask them what motivates you to participate in our cause. Now, don't call your mom first, right? Your mom is going to say she's motivated because she's your mom, right? So we're looking for your 5 or 10 folks that are supporting your cause, that are giving regularly, that are giving substantial amounts, and just ask them, like, what about what we're doing? What about our messaging? What about the work that the results and the impact do you find alignment with that actually brings you to want to participate? I want to better understand. I do it this way. I say, hey, Jane, you're such an important part of what we're doing here at ABC Foundation. We could not do this without your consistent work, and I'm so grateful, and I want to thank you for that. And Jane, honestly, if I could have 100 people like you, we would be in a completely different place. Like 2020 aside, we would have we are just doing gangbusters. And if we had 100 people like you, Jane, to do that, I need to understand more about what brings you to work with me, Jane. Like, why do you come here time and time again and work with my cause? Why do you volunteer? Like, just help me understand, like, what is it about our story and your story that brings this into the bond that we share and the relationship that we have together. And then just let her talk and find out what Jane has to say, and then use that time to unpack that. You're not looking for more from Jane other than insights and expectations that you can then go out and find more Janes, okay? So that's what you're doing here. You're bringing people into alignment. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, as a general rule, we should meet people where they are, and we should make it effortless. And this is a big pet peeve of mine, because I can't tell you how many times I've worked with some of the greatest causes out there where the executive team and the board, they are dialed in and they just are very, very passionate. They're good people, and they love what they're about. And I just want to hug them, right? Like if the social distancing's over, I'm going to go hug them all. I'm grateful for them, and I love what they're doing. But when it comes to making a donation on their website, or when it comes to actually getting involved, there's just a lot of friction. And this is what, as a technology guy, this is what I've set out to solve, because I think that if we get everything else right and we don't make this part right, we really struggle as an organization, don't we? And we all feel this. We feel this when things are just, we do all this work and all this energy, but just nothing's converting. No one's becoming lifelong ambassadors with our cause. So let's reduce the friction. Now, there's different ways that we do this with technology. I certainly don't mind sharing about my company, Rally, and what we do to reduce the friction there. We can certainly discuss that. I wouldn't be talking about it if I didn't believe in it, so I'm certainly happy to do that. But let's start with this. Why don't we start with downloading the Donor Journey Blueprint, which is available on our website. Just click this button or hit our website, and I think it pops up there. But just email me, and I'll give my information here in a minute, and I'll send you a link to it. But hit the Donor Journey Blueprint, download that. It's a PDF that actually walks you through everything we just discussed. And let me actually bring that up for you real quick. Give me 1 second, and I will. So here's a copy of the Donor Journey Blueprint that's available on our website. You can download it there and learn, kind of go through it. But basically, the way it's designed is to help you think through your current donor journey process. And in here, we'll get into some specific ways that you can attract, engage, and retain your donors, and some of the different metrics we can use to identify the efficiency there. So it's just a template that kind of helps you map out your current donor journey. And then if you join us for, we've got some resources, of course, but if you join us for our next Text Gen Together, or stop by our website and schedule some consultation, we're more than happy to walk you through some ways that we have seen reduce the friction and bring that into alignment in all of our communication strategies. So we'll walk through that together, but I wanted to share the Donor Journey Blueprint with you. Your call to action on this session here is to go download that, take a look at it. There's some call to actions within that. Fill out fill the forms in, and then join us for the next Text Gen Together, where we'll actually go through your donor journey blueprint if you feel comfortable sharing it, and we can actually walk through some ways that we're actually driving that. Okay, so that's the next step for you. Questions and answers. I'm going to take that offline and not record that because I want you to feel comfortable just sharing the questions that you have without concern for that necessarily being published on the web. So I'll take it offline now so we can do our Q&A. Before I do that, here's how you can get a hold of me. Just text James to 24365. If you text James to 24365, then you'll get a link to my business card. You can drop that in. That actually contains my personal cell phone, so you can then text and email me and contact me there. I'm also James at rallycorp.com. And then pretty much every social handle is right there, Mr. James Martin. Okay? If you have any questions, feel free to stop by our website at rallycorp.com. We're in the business of helping you cultivate and inspire passionate supporters, and we do that by, of course, reducing the friction and then bringing mobile messaging into perfect alignment with your purpose as an organization. We want to make sure if you're going to deploy something like mobile, it's highly effective if you do it conversational and relational, but we will not work with you if we can't identify how we're going to bring that into alignment with your overall communication strategy and bring that into alignment with the other things that you're working on. Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks again for your time. And if you're on the chat, please stay put. I'll get to your questions here in just 1 minute. Thank you, everybody.